The morning sun rose over the green fields of New Terra like it had done for 20 years, since humans first came to this world. Dae-ho Kim walked through his cornfields, checking the plants that grew tall and strong in the alien soil. The air smelled sweet and clean, and birds that looked almost like earth sparrows sang in the trees. His wife Mi-young called from their house that breakfast was ready, and their son Dong-woo ran out to help gather the last eggs from their chickens. This was paradise, and 77 million humans called New Terra home. Dae-ho had been a soldier, once back on Earth, but those days felt like a dream now. He traded his rifle for a farming tool and his uniform for work clothes covered in honest dirt. The Galactic Council had welcomed humans into their space family 5 years ago, and everything seemed perfect. Human doctors helped sick aliens get better, and human engineers built better ships for everyone. Trade flowed between worlds, and children grew up knowing they lived in a time of peace. Sora Park finished her morning rounds at New Terra Medical Center in the capital city of Haven. As the chief doctor for the whole planet, she saw how healthy and happy the human settlers had become. The alien patients she treated always thanked her with gifts from their home worlds. The council had given humans this beautiful world to live on and promised them safety among the stars. She looked out her office window at the busy streets filled with humans going about their daily lives. Mothers pushed baby carriers while fathers headed to work. Children played in parks and laughed without fear. Tae-min Lee sat in his engineering office high up in Haven Tower, working on plans for a new water treatment plant. The colony grew bigger every month as more ships arrived from Earth, bringing families who wanted a fresh start. His computers showed that the population had just passed 77 million people. He smiled, thinking about his girlfriend Hye-jin, who worked at the spaceport. Tonight they planned to watch the sunset from the hills outside town, like they did every week. High above New Terra, the Galactic Council fleet dropped out of hyperspace without warning. 40 massive warships appeared in the sky like dark clouds, blocking out the sun. On the flagship, Chancellor Vexthul of the Manthari Empire looked down at the human world through cold reptilian eyes. His scaled hands moved across control panels as he gave orders to his officers. The humans below had no idea what was coming. The council had made their decision in secret meetings that humans were never invited to. They called humans a Class X aggressive parasite species that would spread across the galaxy like a disease. Humans bred too fast and learned too quickly. They adapted to any world and made friends with every species they met. In just 5 years, humans had gone from one world to dozens of colonies. The council feared that humans would soon outnumber them all. The first energy blast fell from the sky like lightning and turned entire city blocks into glass and ash. The warning sirens in Haven began screaming, but it was already too late. Dae-ho looked up from his fields to see balls of fire falling from space. The ground shook under his feet and his house exploded in a flash of blue light. Mi-young and Dong-woo were inside. Sora Park ran through the hospital halls as the building shook around her. Injured people poured in through the doors, but she could not save them all. Through the windows, she saw the city burning and council ships hovering in the sky like metal vultures. An alien patient she had treated just yesterday looked at her with sad eyes and whispered that he was sorry before the roof caved in. Tae-min Lee watched the destruction from his tower office as council ships fired their quantum disruptors at every human settlement on the planet. The weapons were designed to kill humans but leave the buildings mostly intact. The council wanted to keep New Terra for themselves after they wiped out every last human. He tried calling Hye-jin at the spaceport, but the lines were all dead. Through his window, he could see the port burning in the distance. The attack was not random or angry. It was cold and planned and efficient, like a machine built to kill. The council had studied human cities and knew exactly where to hit to cause the most death. Schools and hospitals burned first, then homes and farms. The aliens wanted to make sure no human children would grow up to threaten their empire. Dae-ho crawled through the burning ruins of his house calling for his family, but found only silence. His military training came back to him and he grabbed his old service pistol from a hidden safe. Outside, the air filled with smoke and the smell of death. Other survivors stumbled through the wreckage like ghosts, looking for people who would never answer their calls. The bombardment continued for 3 days and 3 nights. Council ships moved across the planet's surface like farmers harvesting crops. They burned every human settlement from the biggest cities to the smallest farms. Mining stations deep underground and research posts in remote mountains were the only places the energy weapons could not reach. Sora Park found herself trapped in a medical bunker 50 feet below Haven with 12 other survivors. They had food and water for maybe a week. Above them, the city burned and human bodies filled the streets. She tried to contact other survivors using emergency radios but heard only static. The council ships jammed all communications to make sure no calls for help could reach Earth. Tae Min Lee made it to an old mining complex in the northern mountains, where 200 humans hid in tunnels carved deep into rock. The survivors included farmers and teachers and children who cried for parents who would never come. They had no weapons and no ships and no way to fight back against the council fleet that circled overhead like sharks. On the third day, the energy blasts finally stopped. The council had done their job and 77 million humans were dead. Only a few thousand survived in places too deep or too remote for the alien weapons to find. The beautiful world of New Terra had become a graveyard covered in ash and filled with ghosts. Chancellor Vexthul sent a message to the other council worlds announcing that the human threat had been eliminated. He described humans as a virus that had been successfully contained and destroyed. The other alien species celebrated and praised the Manthari Empire for protecting galactic peace. They agreed that humans were too dangerous to be allowed to spread beyond Earth. Daeho found an old quantum beacon in the ruins of the communication center. His hands shook as he recorded a message telling Earth what had happened to New Terra. His voice broke as he described the death of his family and his world. He knew the council would intercept the message but hoped somehow it would reach home and someone would remember the 77 million humans who died. The beacon transmitted into space, carrying the last words of New Terra as Daeho collapsed from his injuries. Above him, the council ships prepared to leave orbit satisfied with their work. They had sent a message to all humans that their species was not welcome among the stars. They thought the matter was finished, and humans would stay on Earth like frightened children. They had no idea that their message would reach someone who would make them pay for every single human life they had taken. 6 months after New Terra died, the quantum beacon finally reached Earth. The message traveled through hyperspace for weeks, bouncing off relay stations and dodging council patrol ships that tried to intercept human communications. When it arrived at Luna Station, the duty officer almost deleted it thinking it was old data, until he heard Daeho Kim speaking through the static about his burning world and dead family. The message went straight to Earth Defense Command, where Hyun-Soo Choi sat in his office looking at reports that made no sense. For months, the council had been blocking all travel to human colonies and claiming technical problems whenever Earth asked questions. Supply ships sent to New Terra and other human worlds never returned, and the council said they were lost in hyperspace accidents. Now he knew the truth, and his hands shook with rage as he watched the footage Daeho had recorded. Hyun-Soo knew only one person who could handle this kind of situation, and finding him would not be easy. Ji-Woo Han had disappeared 3 years ago after a classified mission went wrong. The man they called the Hunter had been Earth's most dangerous weapon against hostile alien species, but something had broken inside him, and he vanished without a trace. Military records said he was dead, but Hyun-Soo knew better. The search took 2 weeks and finally led to Ganymede Station, where a bar owner named Chen remembered a quiet Korean man who drank alone and never caused trouble. The man had scars on his hands and eyes that seemed to look right through people. He paid his bills in untraceable credits and sometimes disappeared for days at a time. Chen pointed Hyun-Soo toward an old mining facility on the dark side of Jupiter's moon. Ji-Woo Han lived alone in a shelter built inside an abandoned mine shaft, where the silence was so complete he could hear his own heartbeat. He had come here to forget the things he had done in service to Earth and the alien species he had killed with his bare hands. The walls of his shelter were covered with research about alien biology and psychology that he studied like a monk reading holy books. He knew more about how aliens thought and fought than any human alive. The knock on his door came at midnight, and Ji-Woo knew who it was before he opened it. Hyun-Soo stood in the airlock holding a datapad with news that would change everything. Ji-Woo listened to Daeho's message without speaking, and watched the footage of New Terra burning with eyes that showed no emotion. When it finished, he was quiet for a long time before asking how many humans had died. 77 million was the answer, and those numbers hit Jiwoo like a physical blow. He had spent 3 years trying to forget that he was a weapon designed to kill, but the universe would not let him rest. The faces of the dead humans called to him from across space, demanding justice that only he could deliver. The hunter was awake again, and the galaxy would learn to fear the darkness he carried inside his soul. Bo Young Seo arrived the next morning with classified files about the Council's secret communications. She had been Jiwoo's partner during their special operations days and the only person who truly understood what he was capable of doing. The aliens thought they were safe behind their advanced technology and superior numbers, but they had never faced a human who studied their weaknesses like Jiwoo did. The intelligence reports painted a clear picture of what had happened. The Council had branded humanity as Class X aggressive parasites and placed a total quarantine around human space. Any ship trying to leave the Sol system would be destroyed on sight, and the aliens planned to keep humans trapped on Earth until they eventually died out. The attack on New Terra was just the beginning of a slow genocide that would take generations to complete. Jiwoo studied the files with the focus of a predator learning about its prey. The Council species had evolved on safe worlds where they faced no natural enemies, and their military tactics reflected this weakness. They relied on overwhelming firepower and advanced technology, but had no experience fighting creatures that refused to die. Earth animals had survived millions of years of evolution by becoming tough and mean and adaptable. The plan that formed in Jiwoo's mind was so crazy that Bo Young thought he had finally lost his sanity. He wanted to create an army of enhanced honey badgers and use them to wage war against the entire Galactic Council. Honey badgers were already the most fearless and relentless creatures on Earth, and with the right modifications, they could become the perfect weapon against alien species that had never faced a true predator. Hyun-soo listened to the plan with growing amazement and horror. Jiwoo wanted to break into the classified bioweapons facility on Titan, where Earth scientists had been working on genetic enhancement projects. The honey badgers would be cloned and modified with intelligence boosters and adaptive camouflage and neural implants that would let them coordinate attacks. Each one would be a living weapon programmed with one simple mission: to hunt down and kill the aliens who murdered 77 million humans. The bioweapons facility was guarded by the best security Earth could provide, but Jiwoo had designed most of those defenses himself during his military service. He knew every sensor and camera and automated gun system that protected the secret laboratories. Getting inside would be like breaking into his own house, and the guards would never see him coming. Bo Young tried to talk him out of it by reminding him that creating biological weapons was illegal under Earth law and could start a war that humanity could not win. The Council had millions of ships and controlled most of the galaxy, while Earth had maybe 1,000 vessels and no allies. Jiwoo listened to her arguments with patience, but his mind was already made up. The aliens had started this war when they burned New Terra, and now they would learn what happened when humans fought back. The infiltration of Titan Station happened on a moonless night when the facility was running on skeleton crew. Jiwoo moved through the corridors like a ghost, avoiding security patrols and disabling cameras with equipment that left no trace of his presence. The genetic templates he needed were stored in a vault protected by quantum locks that would have stopped any normal thief. But Jiwoo was not normal. Dr. Yoon was working late in her laboratory when Jiwoo appeared behind her like a shadow, stepping out of darkness. She had lost her parents and 2 sisters on New Terra, and when Jiwoo explained his plan, her grief turned into cold fury. The aliens thought humans were parasites, but she would show them what a real parasite could do when it got inside their perfect galactic civilization. The honey badger genetic templates were stored in crystalline memory cores that contained the complete DNA sequence for creating enhanced versions of Earth's most aggressive mammal. Jiwoo copied the files onto portable drives while Yoonji gathered the equipment they would need to start growing their army. Behind them, alarms began to sound as security systems detected the break-in, but by then, they were already gone. Back on Ganymede, Jiwoo began recruiting the team he would need to turn his crazy plan into reality. Seung-ho Park was a former smuggler who knew how to move illegal goods through space without getting caught. Young-mi Kim was an engineer who could design armor and weapons for creatures that had never worn them before. Each person he contacted had lost someone on New Terra, and wanted revenge against the Council. The quantum beacon that brought news of New Terra's death also carried something else hidden in its data stream. Dae-ho Kim had included genetic samples from plants and animals native to the colony world that might be useful for biological research. Jiwoo realized these samples could be used to create hybrid organisms that combined the best traits of Earth and alien biology. As Earth's leaders debated what to do about the Council's quarantine, Jiwoo was already putting his plan into action. The aliens thought they had won by destroying one human world, but they had only awakened something far more dangerous than any army or fleet. The hunter was loose in the galaxy again, and this time he would not stop until 77 million. Human deaths had been avenged in blood and terror that would make the Council wish they had never heard of Earth. The secret laboratory on Titan grew like a cancer hidden beneath the ice where no Council spy satellites could detect its presence. Jiwoo Han worked 18 hours every day with Dr. Yoon Ji-yoon creating the weapons that would bring justice to 77 million dead humans. The honey badger genetic templates downloaded from Earth's bioweapons facility became the foundation for something that had never existed before in the galaxy. Yoon-ji had been one of Earth's best geneticists before she lost her family on New Terra, and now her grief drove her to push the boundaries of what science could achieve. The first honey badger clone that emerged from the growth tank was twice the size of a normal badger with muscles like steel cables and claws that could cut through titanium hull plating. Its eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost human, but behind that intelligence burned a rage that would never be satisfied. The neural implant technology came from captured Council equipment that Seung-ho Park smuggled through the quarantine blockade, using routes known only to the most skilled criminals. The aliens never suspected that their own computer systems would be turned against them by creatures they considered inferior. Each honey badger received implants that allowed basic tactical communication and the ability to operate simple alien technology. Young-mi Kim designed armor that would protect the badgers in space while allowing them to move with the speed and agility that made them perfect predators. The suits were built from metamaterials that could adapt to any environment and included life support systems that would keep the badgers alive in the vacuum between stars. Tiny rocket thrusters gave them limited flight capability, and magnetic clamps let them attach to enemy ships. The breeding program expanded rapidly as more clones matured and began reproducing with selective traits that enhanced their combat effectiveness. Each generation became smarter and more aggressive than the last, as Yoon-ji tweaked their genetic code to remove any trace of fear or hesitation. The badgers learned to work together in coordinated packs that could overwhelm much larger opponents through sheer relentless determination. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council remained confident that the human problem had been solved permanently. Chancellor Vexthal gave speeches about the successful elimination of the Class X aggressive parasite threat, and other Council species praised the Manthari Empire for protecting galactic civilization. Trade routes reopened and construction began on new colonies that would replace the worlds where humans once lived. The first test of Jiwoo's plan came when a Council reconnaissance patrol approached Jupiter to investigate suspicious energy readings from the outer moons. The three-ship formation included a Manthari cruiser and two escort vessels crewed by reptilian soldiers who had participated in the New Terra massacre. They detected nothing unusual on their sensors and prepared to return to Council space with reports that human activity remained contained to Earth. The attack came without warning when 50 honey badgers in stealth suits attached themselves to the patrol ships during a routine sensor sweep. The creatures moved across the hulls like shadows, finding airlocks and maintenance ports that the alien crews never thought to secure. Honey badgers could squeeze through spaces barely larger than their heads, and once inside a ship, they became unstoppable forces of destruction. The Manthari captain tried to sound an alarm, but the badgers had already reached the bridge where they tore through control systems with claws that could shred metal like paper. The alien crew panicked when they saw the small furry creatures that seemed immune to their energy weapons and refused to die even when shot multiple times. Their screams echoed through the ship corridors as the badgers hunted them down one by one. In less than 20 minutes, all three ships were silent and drifting in space with their hulls scarred by claw marks and their crews scattered in pieces throughout the corridors. The honey badgers planted recording devices to monitor Council communications then used the ship's own weapons to destroy the evidence of their presence. The only trace left behind was a simple message carved into the bridge of each vessel that read, 77 million. News of the missing patrol reached Council headquarters within hours, but Chancellor Vexthul dismissed the disappearance as another hyperspace navigation accident. The Council had grown soft after centuries of peace and could not imagine that their advanced warships might be vulnerable to attack by creatures barely larger than house cats. The investigation team that went looking for the missing ships found only scattered wreckage and no sign of what had destroyed them. Dr. Yunji celebrated the successful test by beginning production of the second-generation Badgers that incorporated lessons learned from the first attack. These creatures were even more intelligent and carried genetic modifications that allowed them to digest alien organic matter for sustenance. They would never need food supplies during long missions and could survive indefinitely inside enemy ships by consuming their victims. The breeding facilities expanded to 3 more hidden locations throughout the outer solar system, as the honey badger army grew to over 2,000 individuals. Each badger received specialized training for different types of missions, from ship infiltration to planetary sabotage. They learned to use Council weapons and operate alien computer systems with an efficiency that would have impressed their creators if the aliens had lived long enough to appreciate it. Seungho Park reported that Council shipping lanes were becoming increasingly nervous about unexplained attacks on isolated vessels. Merchant captains spoke in whispers about ghost ships found drifting empty, with only claw marks to indicate what had happened to their crews. The aliens began traveling in larger convoys with military escorts, but this only made them more attractive targets for the growing badger swarms. Young Mai Kim developed new weapons specifically designed for the badgers, including micro-explosives that could be placed inside vital ship systems and molecular acid that could eat through any known material. Each badger became a self-contained weapon of mass destruction capable of crippling vessels hundreds of times its size through cunning and determination, rather than brute force. The psychological impact of the attacks began to spread through Council space as news of the mysterious disappearances reached civilian populations. Some species remembered ancient legends about small predatory creatures that hunted in packs and showed no fear of larger opponents. The older aliens warned that humanity might have unleashed something from their world's violent past that the galaxy was not prepared to face. Jiwoo monitored Council communications and watched with satisfaction as panic began to replace the confidence that had led to New Terra's destruction. The aliens had thought themselves superior to humans, but they were learning that Earth had produced creatures far more dangerous than any civilized species could imagine. The honey badgers were evolution's perfect answer to technological superiority. The first coordinated multi-ship attack took place near the Rigel system, where a Council supply convoy was carrying medical supplies to colonies on the outer rim. 50 badgers hidden inside cargo containers activated simultaneously and began tearing through the convoy from the inside. The alien crews tried to evacuate but found their escape pods sabotaged and their communications jammed by creatures that had studied their technology better than they understood it themselves. The convoy's destruction was recorded by automated beacons and transmitted to Council headquarters, where military analysts studied the footage with growing horror. The small creatures moved with purpose and intelligence that suggested they were more than simple animals. Their coordinated tactics and use of alien equipment indicated that someone was controlling them from a distance. Chancellor Vexthul finally admitted that the Council faced a new threat unlike anything in their military experience. The missing patrols and destroyed convoys formed a pattern that pointed directly back toward human space, where something was building an army designed specifically to hunt down and kill Council species. The aliens who had massacred 77 million innocent humans were about to learn what it felt like to be prey. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened on Galaxis Prime as reports flooded in from across their territory about ships disappearing and crews found torn apart by creatures no one could identify. Chancellor Vexthul stood before the assembled representatives of 47 species and tried to maintain his authority while panic spread through the chamber like wildfire. In 3 months, they had lost over 200 vessels to attacks that left behind only scattered wreckage and strange claw marks. Admiral Kilthan of the Zenthari fleet presented his analysis to the Council with hands that shook despite his centuries of military experience. The attacks showed patterns that suggested intelligence and planning beyond what any known predator species possessed. The creatures struck supply convoys and isolated patrols with surgical precision while avoiding heavily armed battle groups. They seemed to know exactly where Council ships would be and when they would be most vulnerable. Dr. Ixamora from the Scientific Consortium had been studying tissue samples recovered from attack sites, and her findings made the assembled aliens shift uncomfortably in their seats. The genetic material came from Earth creatures called honey badgers, but these specimens showed modifications that were impossible according to Council biological science. Someone had enhanced the animals with adaptive camouflage organs and reinforced skeletal structures and neural pathways that allowed complex problem-solving abilities. The revelation that humans had created biological weapons sent waves of fear through the Council chamber as species that had lived in peace for millennia realized they faced an enemy unlike any in their history. The Manthari delegates demanded immediate military action against Earth, while the peaceful Aldorian representatives called for negotiations. Chancellor Vexthul knew that either choice would admit the Council had made a mistake in attacking New So. Terra reports continued arriving from the outer territories where entire star systems were going dark, as Council ships sent to investigate simply vanished without sending distress calls. The honey badgers had learned to disable communication systems before beginning their attacks to prevent their victims from warning others. Each successful mission made the creatures bolder and more efficient at hunting their alien prey. On the Thierry mining world of Kepler 442b, a Council research station went silent after reporting strange sounds in their ventilation systems during the night shift. The rescue team that arrived 3 days later found the facility intact, but completely empty, except for small tunnels carved through solid rock walls. Every piece of equipment had been methodically destroyed, and the researchers had simply disappeared, leaving behind only traces of blood and torn fabric. The Vegan Trade Guild lost an entire merchant fleet near the Centauri Nebula when something disabled their hyperspace engines and trapped them in normal space where the Badgers had time to board every ship systematically. The attack was recorded by an automated probe that showed small figures in advanced armor suits moving between vessels like ghosts that could walk through vacuum without life support systems. Captain Morthak of the destroyer Vengeance became the first Council officer to survive a honey badger attack, and his testimony sent shockwaves through military command. His ship had been patrolling the border of human space when creatures no larger than his forearm had somehow infiltrated the vessel through microscopic hull breaches. They moved through the ship like liquid death, killing his crew with claws that cut through body armor like tissue paper. The captain described how the creatures showed no fear of energy weapons and seemed to anticipate every tactical move his security teams made. When cornered, they fought with a fury that defied logic, attacking until their hearts stopped beating and their neural implants finally went dark. Even wounded and dying, they continued trying to complete their mission to kill every alien on the ship. Nam Su-Yung intercepted Council communications from his listening post hidden in the asteroid belt and reported that alien morale was collapsing across their military forces. Recruitment had dropped to almost zero as species that had never known real warfare faced the prospect of being hunted by creatures that treated death as just another obstacle to overcome. Some Council worlds were demanding withdrawal from the alliance that had brought this nightmare upon them. The honey badger army had grown to over 5,000 individuals spread across dozens of hidden bases throughout the solar system where they bred and trained and waited for their next missions. Each new generation incorporated improvements based on data collected from successful attacks, and the creatures were evolving at a rate that terrified even their human creators. They had begun modifying themselves through selective breeding that emphasized traits useful for hunting specific alien species. Dr. Yoon Ji-yoon worked around the clock, developing new enhancements that would make the Badgers even more effective at their deadly mission. The latest modifications included organs that could process alien atmospheres and digestive systems that could break down any organic compound for nutrition. The creatures were becoming perfect biological weapons designed specifically to hunt and kill the species that had murdered 77 million humans. Council scientists tried desperately to develop countermeasures against the honey badger attacks, but every defensive system they created was quickly overcome by creatures that learned from each encounter. The Badgers adapted to new security protocols faster than the aliens could implement them, and their neural implants allowed them to share knowledge instantly across the entire population. The psychological warfare aspect of the campaign proved even more devastating than the physical attacks as Council species began turning against each other in paranoia and fear. Some aliens accused others of secretly working with the humans, while merchant captains refused to leave port without military escorts that were becoming increasingly difficult to obtain. The galactic economy began grinding to a halt as trade routes closed and colonies requested emergency evacuations. Chancellor Vexthol found himself facing calls for his resignation as the architect of the New Terra massacre that had brought this catastrophe upon the Council. The Manthari Empire's reputation as the protector of galactic civilization crumbled as their fleets proved helpless against an enemy they could neither find nor fight effectively. Other species began questioning whether the Council's leadership was competent enough to handle the crisis. The Honey Badgers expanded their operations beyond simple ship attacks to include infiltration of Council military bases and government facilities where they gathered intelligence and eliminated key personnel. Their small size allowed them to access areas that larger organisms could never reach, and their enhanced intelligence let them operate complex alien technology with disturbing efficiency. A coordinated strike against the Council's main communication relay at Wolf 359 left the Alien Alliance temporarily blind and deaf as the Badgers systematically destroyed every piece of equipment in the facility before vanishing into space. The attack demonstrated that the creatures could work together on a galactic scale with timing and precision that suggested central coordination from someone who understood Council infrastructure better than most aliens. The breaking point came when Honey Badgers infiltrated the Council's military academy on Proxima Centauri and eliminated an entire class of officer cadets along with their instructors. The creatures had somehow learned the academy's daily schedule and security protocols well enough to carry out a perfect operation that left no survivors and minimal evidence. The message was clear that no Council facility was safe from the vengeful fury of Earth's enhanced predators. Admiral Kilthan submitted his resignation after losing 3 more fleets to Badger attacks in a single week, and other military commanders followed his example rather than face creatures that killed without fear or mercy. The Council's armed forces began a slow collapse as officers refused assignments to areas where the Honey Badgers were known to operate, and enlisted personnel deserted rather than face an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. As reports of the expanding Badger campaign reached Earth through intercepted communications, Jiwoo Han prepared for the final phase of his plan. The aliens who had committed genocide against innocent humans had learned what it felt like to live in terror, but their punishment was not complete. Soon the hunter himself would enter Council space with his most elite Badgers to deliver justice directly to the architects of New Terra's destruction. Jiwoo Han stood on the bridge of his stealth ship Retribution as it crossed the boundary into Council space, carrying death in its cargo holds. Behind him, 50 of his most advanced Honey Badgers waited in specialized armor that would let them survive the vacuum of space and the toxic atmospheres of alien worlds. These creatures were no longer simple animals but evolved weapons of vengeance, programmed with one mission to make the Galactic Council pay for murdering 77 million innocent humans. The ship moved through hyperspace like a ghost following routes that Seong-ho Park had mapped during his smuggling days when Council security was focused on stopping drugs and weapons rather than biological nightmares created by human ingenuity. Every system had been modified to avoid detection by alien sensors, and the hull absorbed energy signatures that would normally reveal their presence to enemy patrols. Alpha 7 was the leader of Jiwoo's elite Badger unit and the most intelligent creature ever created in Earth's biological weapons program. The neural implants that connected his brain to tactical computers gave him access to information about Council military capabilities that would have impressed their own generals. His enhanced vocal cords could produce sounds in any alien language, and his adaptive camouflage could mimic the appearance of dozens of different species. Chancellor Vexthol sat in his office on Galaxis Prime reading reports that painted a picture of total military collapse as Honey Badger attacks spread throughout Council territory like a plague that consumed everything in its path. Half of their fleet had been destroyed or abandoned, and the remaining ships clustered around heavily defended core worlds, where terrified crews refused to venture into open space. The Manthari Empire that had once ruled through strength now cowered behind defensive shields. The first sign of Jiwoo's arrival came when the orbital defense platforms around Galaxis Prime began exploding in sequence as tiny figures moved across their hulls like spiders dismantling a web. The honey badgers had infiltrated the defensive network through maintenance conduits and were methodically destroying the weapons that protected the Council's capital world. Each explosion sent waves of panic through the military command center, where Admiral Kilthan watched his last line of defense crumble. Sora Park emerged from her underground shelter on New Terra, where she had survived for 8 months eating emergency rations and drinking recycled water while hoping that someone would remember the dead of her world. The honey badger attacks had given her hope that Earth had not forgotten New Terra's fate, and now she received a coded transmission that told her to prepare for extraction. The hunter was coming to collect the witnesses to the Council's genocide. The planet's surface was still scarred with the burns of orbital bombardment, and the cities remained empty ruins where 77 million humans had died in 3 days of systematic extermination. Sora walked through the streets of Haven where she had once saved lives as a doctor, and now only ghosts walked beside her among the rubble of their former homes. The Council had wanted to erase humanity from this world, but they had only created a monument to their own evil. Daeho Kim crawled out of the mining complex where he had hidden since the attack and looked up at the sky where Council ships had once blotted out the sun with their terrible presence. His family was still dead, and his world was still a graveyard, but somehow he had survived long enough to see the beginning of justice. The quantum beacon he had sent to Earth 8 months ago had reached the right person, and now the galaxy would learn what happened when humans were pushed too far. The invasion of Galaxis Prime began at dawn when 10,000 honey badgers dropped from orbit in stealth pods that scattered across the planet like seeds of destruction. They landed in cities and military bases and government facilities where they began hunting Council leaders with the patience of predators who had learned to enjoy the fear of their prey. The creatures had studied the faces of every alien who participated in New Terra's destruction, and they would not stop until justice was complete. Chancellor Vexthul activated the planetary defense grid and called for every available warship to defend the capital, but his orders fell on deaf ears as crews abandoned their posts rather than face creatures that killed without mercy or hesitation. The honey badgers moved through the city like a plague, consuming everything in their path, while government officials tried desperately to escape on ships that had already been sabotaged by earlier infiltration teams. The council chambers where the decision to destroy New Terra had been made became a battlefield as honey badgers swarmed through ventilation systems and emergency exits to surround the alien delegates who had voted for human extinction. The creatures showed no interest in negotiation or surrender, but simply began their work of reducing the galaxy's leaders to scattered pieces that matched the remains of 77 million innocent humans. Jiwoo landed his ship in the ruins of the Council's military headquarters and walked through corridors filled with the screams of dying aliens who were learning what terror felt like for the first time in their pampered lives. His honey badgers had cleared the building room by room, eliminating anyone wearing a council uniform or government badge. The hunter moved toward Chancellor Vexthul's office with the patience of death itself. Alpha 7 reached the Chancellor first and found the Manthari leader cowering behind his desk, clutching a ceremonial weapon that had never been used in actual combat. The honey badger spoke in perfect Manthari, explaining that Chancellor Vexthul was guilty of genocide against humanity, and that his sentence was death by dismemberment. The alien screams echoed through the building as claws that could cut titanium began their work of justice. The battle for Galaxis Prime lasted 3 days and ended with every council government building burning and every military installation reduced to rubble filled with alien corpses. The honey badgers had hunted down everyone connected to the New Terra massacre and executed them with the same methodical efficiency that had characterized the original attack. The capital of galactic civilization had become a charnel house, where predators from Earth's violent past taught advanced species what real warfare looked like. Dr. Ixmora was the last council scientist to die, and she spent her final moments studying the creatures that had destroyed her civilization with professional curiosity, even as they tore her apart. The honey badgers represented evolution's answer to technological superiority, and she understood that the Council had made a fundamental error in underestimating species that had survived billions of years of natural selection through cunning and relentless determination. News of Galaxis Prime's fall spread throughout Council space, where the remaining alien governments immediately began broadcasting surrender offers and pleas for mercy. The Honey Badger campaign had broken their military power and shattered their confidence in the superiority they had used to justify genocide. Species that had never known defeat now begged for terms from creatures they had dismissed as inferior parasites. Ji-Woo stood in the ruins of the Council chambers, where the vote to destroy New Terra had taken place, and recorded his response to their surrender offers. His voice was calm and cold as he explained that the honey badgers would continue hunting until every alien who participated in human genocide was dead, and that any species found harboring war criminals would face the same fate as the Manthari Empire. The Galactic Accords were signed 1 year later in a ceremony held in the rebuilt capital of New Terra, where monuments to 77 million dead humans reminded the galaxy of the price of genocide. The surviving Council species agreed to establish the Human Protection Protocol that would make attacking human civilians a crime punishable by total species extinction. Honey Badger units were stationed throughout former Council space as living reminders of what happened to civilizations that underestimated Earth's children. So-Ra Park became the first human ambassador to the reformed Galactic Council, and she carried with her a small honey badger named Justice, who sat on her shoulder during diplomatic meetings as a symbol of humanity's new relationship with alien species. The galaxy had learned that humans were not parasites or victims, but partners who would defend themselves with a ferocity that peaceful civilizations could never match. Daiho Kim returned to farming on New Terra, where the soil was still enriched by the ashes of his murdered family and 77 million other victims of alien arrogance. Beside him worked honey badgers who had traded their weapons for farming tools, but retained the deadly skills that had brought justice to the galaxy. They guarded the memorial gardens where every human who died was remembered with flowers that bloomed eternal in alien soil. The hunter disappeared back into the darkness between stars, where legend said he still traveled with his honey badger armies, ensuring that no species would ever again mistake human mercy for weakness. The galaxy had found peace, but it was a peace built on the understanding that some creatures would never stop fighting until justice was served and the price of genocide had been paid in full.